Okay, so talking about France and chapter 16 here. Again, I guess maybe one of the countries that you hear more about in Europe. It's a very influential nation. So here we see the country of France, and I'll be the first of the couple countries that we'll focus on here with this chapter. So here's France on the map. Here we see the French tricolor, the French flag. As far as a little bit about the physical geography of France, again, kind of how we've been doing it, we've been breaking it down into physical regions. So northern France, so if you're looking here, northern France, again, we're looking at the northern part of the country, okay, close to the English Channel, and this area kind of in here. This is, I guess, what you would call the quote unquote the functional economic center of the country. It is home to the capital city of Paris, which I know we've at some point in time you have all have heard about. But the northern part is the kind of the functional economic center. You have a lot of the major businesses that are located there and that sort of thing. So again, it's a huge economic influence for the country. A lot of manufacturing and industry there. And again, this northern part of the country, it is home to the city of Paris, the French capital, that is so important for the economy, the politics, and really French culture in general. Okay, so again, we're talking northern France, this region here. In southwestern France, so we're looking southwest, we're looking in this area here. It's warm, right? It's, again, borders the Atlantic Ocean here to the west, and it's very warm, kind of almost dry. Um, and in this region, the winemaking industry, it's kind of like the big part of the economy for that region of France, and it's really important worldwide for winemaking, and that's kind of their main economic function. I know you would think of that being kind of wow, like that's what they do is make wine, but that's a huge part of the economy in the southwestern part of the country. Getting into the southern part of France, this is going to be where you see more of the mountains and that kind of thing. And there's two major mountain ranges in southern France. The two mountain ranges that are very important are the Massif Central and then the French Alps. Okay, so those are two of the mountain ranges that you'll find in southern France. Mount Blanc is the highest mountain in France. It's a part of the French Alps. So if we go back a slide here, here are the Alps. Okay, here are the Alps, here are the Massif Central. Again, the Alps kind of separate France from Switzerland and Italy. And again, those are the two larger mountain ranges in the southern portion of the country. And again, Mount Blanc is the highest mountain in the French Alps. Moving even further south along the Mediterranean. So again, kind of going back and looking at our map, looking at this area here, here's the Mediterranean Sea. I'm kind of tracing over it with my mouse cursor right now. And along the Mediterranean coast, you see some of the most beautiful weather in the world. And this region is known as the French Riviera. If you've ever heard the Darius Rucker song, he talks about the French Riviera in there. But known as the French Riviera, here you see a picture. It's very beautiful. There's 365 days in a year. The French Riviera usually receives about 340 days of sunshine in a year. So the weather is very beautiful. It's very warm. A lot of expensive resorts are there. That's where a lot of celebrities and I guess wealthy European folks, where a lot of them go and hang out along the Mediterranean coast on the French Riviera. Very expensive to go there, but very beautiful. And there you see a picture. So it's something that maybe you can look forward to at some point. And then in eastern France, we have the Alsace-Lorraine region. It's a huge iron ore deposits are located there in Alsace-Lorraine. So if we go back a couple of slide here, here's Alsace-Lorraine. It's up in this area here. It kind of borders Germany. And World War I, World War II, we'll talk more about those when you guys are sophomores and juniors. When you're sophomores and juniors. But over the course of history, there has been a lot of conflict between France and Germany over the Alsace-Lorraine region. And a lot of it kind of goes back to the fact that some people actually speak German there, some speak French. There's also kind of like a mixed dialect where they speak kind of a combination of French and German. And then talking about World War I, World War II, and some of the things that happened there. So there's been a lot of controversy in Alsace-Lorraine. But currently, present day, Alsace-Lorraine is a part of France. Okay, talking a little bit more about the history and culture. The country that we now know as France, it was first known as Gaul. Gaul, that's what the first settlers there had named it. In the first century BC, so you're talking a couple thousand years ago, the Romans actually are going to conquer Gaul. Over the course of time, what happens is the Roman Empire, it fails, and you guys will learn more about that in world history and reasons for that. The Romans got kind of greedy, and Mr. Norman will talk to you guys about that next year. But Gaul eventually gets conquered by the Romans. The Roman Empire is going to fall. Right around the time of the fall of the Roman Empire, a group of people known as the Franks, okay, group of people known as the Franks that were actually, interestingly enough, they were from Germany, but the Franks are going to then conquer Gaul, and they're going to rename Gaul France. Okay, so the Franks essentially named the country after themselves, and they call it France. Later on, European history, what happens is there's a Holy Roman Empire that forms. So if you're looking at this map here, wherever you see yellow, that was a part of the old Holy Roman Empire that existed from like the year 800 all the way up into the 1800s. So, and there was a lot of influence by the Catholic Church there and such. So as you can see, here's France on the map. Basically, the entire eastern portion of the country at one point in time was a part of this Holy Roman Empire. And later what happens is, getting into the 1800s, that Holy Roman Empire is going to fall. But to kind of put that in perspective, freshmen, is if you think about this, the United States, we've been a country for about 240 years, 235 years. France, this goes back thousands of years. So kind of putting things in perspective there. So you have the Holy Roman Empire. Eventually that fails, and you're going to have a series of monarchies in France, kings and queens, right? In the late 1700s, right after the American Revolution, the French are also going to have their own revolution in which they are going to overthrow and put an end to monarchy in France. The people of France had become pretty sick of the way they were treated by monarchs. So there's a very bloody and a very violent revolution, but eventually what does happen is there is an end put to monarchy in France, and France becomes more of a democratic nation where people are going to elect representatives and a president and a prime minister, and they've had varying forms of government here over the years, but all to some degree have been a form of democracy or a republic. Okay, other things here regarding French history. We also have to talk about World War I and World War II briefly, where France and Germany over the years, they've had, not recently, not since World War II so much, but previous to that, they'd had a lot of conflicts over culture and, European imperialism and some other things. And France has been invaded twice by Germany. World War I, World War II, World War I in the early 1900s, World War II in kind of the mid 1900s, 1940s. And again, so that's something that's been a major part of French history. But since World War II, France and Germany, they've gotten along a lot better, and they're actually, relatively close allies now as bordering states, and both being members of the European Union and such. As far as language in France, obviously the big one is French. Understanding though that because France borders other nations, right? It borders Switzerland, it borders Italy, it borders Germany. What does happen is there's many different dialects that are spoken throughout France. So where everything is, it's kind of, there's varying forms of the French language, I guess. It's still French, but depending on where you're at in the country, French in Paris might sound different than it would in, say, Saint-Tropez, or it might sound different than it would in Alsace-Lorraine. Just based on the geography of the country. But French is the primary language, and the people of France speak some form of it. That's kind of a major thing. France, they have a lot of national pride. A lot of it goes back to kind of like their history and their culture. A lot of famous philosophers like the Montesquieus and the Voltaires, and artists like Monet. There's been a lot of the country of France has really contributed a lot to some of the more kind of intellectual and philosophy and arts kind of things that have influenced us. So they're a very proud nation, and a lot of that it's kind of rooted back in some of their early thinkers, some of their early artists and such. And then just talking here, last thing about Paris, and again, that's kind of the cultural center of the country. It's what you hear, the city that you probably hear the most about. Very important. There's a lot of museums and different monuments there that, are some of the most visited in the world. So The three that I've included here, we have the Eiffel Tower, okay, built for the World's Fair back in the 1800s. We have the Arc de Triomphe that was built by the French general Napoleon Bonaparte after a major war. And then we have the Louvre. Okay, the Louvre is probably the most famous art museum in the world. It's, again, a lot of visitors go there to see the different works, like the Mona Lisa, for example, is housed there and such. But there you see the Louvre, and again, Paris is the most important city in France. As far as like French present day and France present day, their economy is really good. Maybe shouldn't say that now with some of the COVID stuff going on, but France and the United States are, the French are the United States' oldest ally. The French were who helped us defeat the British for our independence back in the 1700s. The relationship between the United States and France has kind of gone back and forth recently, politics and such. But again, they are one of the most important U.S. allies, and that goes back, many of years.